Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Pipe Dream and our 1 in 100 series. I'm very excited today to be joined by George Terry over from the team at Winbox. George and I met about a week ago after an introduction by a mutual friend of ours, Mark Thomas. The thing that I walked away from our conversation feeling, other than what a fantastic office you guys have and what a great team you've built around you, is how much traction you guys have picked up on organic LinkedIn and LinkedIn as a whole. And so that's what we're here today to talk about. So tell me a little bit about Winbox and how you're getting your customers today.
Yeah, sure. So we are a LinkedIn ads agency, working with about 50 B2B companies, and most of that growth is from LinkedIn. It's been an interesting journey. So a good few years ago, we were a content business, and we started using LinkedIn as a distribution channel. We were very early to LinkedIn ads, and we saw that it was growing, and we started kind of like thinking, yeah, there's a niche here, especially in the UK, that other people aren't across. And right now, there's loads of people a bit like us. When we first started using LinkedIn ads, it was very niche. So we made the decision just to go all in on that channel. Yeah, unsurprisingly, that is where a lot of our marketing happens, as you'd expect. But that's not all of it. We also do events. I love webinars. We do monthly webinars, quarterly events, outbound email, newsletter. Our LinkedIn accounts are responsible for driving the majority of our kind of inbounds in terms of DMs, but I do believe it all has its place and it all earns its place. It all works together. But yeah, happy to share what we're doing on LinkedIn to drive that growth. I think it's probably more interesting for the perspective of your kind of audience if I talk about it from Winbox's perspective rather than our clients, because I'm so much closer to Winbox and I can talk about like all the way through our kind of pipeline rather than just like the top of funnel stuff, which is what we see for our clients mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the audience of Pipe Dream are predominantly made up of service-based businesses. And so kind of, hearing from another service-based business like yourselves as to, how are you leveraging these channels to drive pipeline is great and very useful. Maybe you can start by just kind of taking us back to the beginning, because the agency's been running for a number of years now, and I'm sure kind of marketing at the beginning of your journey to the marketing of today looks different, right? And so tell us a bit about kind of how you started winning your first clients and walk us through the journey to where you are today. And as you say, like what the acquisition journey now looks like for your customers who are maybe discovering you in some of these channels and ultimately kind of converting.
Yeah. I would think for us specifically, the journey has just been the kind of maturity journey that agencies and service companies go on, which is in the early days, you're really relying a lot on your personal networks and just your kind of personal surface area, knowing lots of people, being about in the industry, in the scene for a while. And as a result, you get introduced to people or you meet people at events. Over the years, we've just, we made a concerted effort like 3 or 4 years ago that we need to break out of our networks because it's not going to take us much further than it already had. And as part of that, we had these really reliable sources of leads, like kind of like business networks, as it were, that we really wound down and stopped focusing on. And we said we need to meet net new companies, like people that we've never spoken to that are nowhere near our network. And the way that we did that was just to invest heavily in marketing. And it sounds like a kind of like, it sounds obvious when you put it like that, but it's a thing that a lot of agencies don't do. They often talk to their clients about the power of marketing and why their clients should invest heavily in marketing while under-investing in their own. I think as an agency, we probably spend more on marketing than like most do, but we certainly see the return on that investment. When you're spending your own money on marketing, it feels very different, as I'm sure it's really easy to spend other people's money on stuff. When it's yours and you're like, that's a holiday we didn't go on, that campaign, you know what I mean? You really look into the ROI, and that's something that certainly, over the past year or so, as we've ramped up our spending, we've got like a lot more kind of mature around. It's like not just like how many deals is this generating and how many of them are closing and what are the size of those deals, but like per channel, what are we having to spend to win a deal from this channel? And like, what's the average size of that deal? Which has been really, really interesting. But yeah, in terms of the overall journey, You could summarize it as it used to be predominantly about our personal networks, and now it's predominantly about our personal brands. So Mark and I have built up like quite large audiences on LinkedIn and really built our personal brands, and that's driven the growth really.
So Mark, obviously being your kind of co-founder, what does the kind of like, well, let's just kind of like start understanding the segments of the pie, as it were. So you've kind of identified like some of the channels that you're investing in. You've got kind of LinkedIn, you've got the events. What percentage of your pipeline is coming from each of these different components? Can we go to that level of detail?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can probably give you the answer to that. I've got it here in a spreadsheet in front of me. Like, if you think about our channels and how we segment our pipeline, we do it in terms of there's referrals, which is just its own thing. And like any other decent company, referrals generates like, a high volume of opportunities, and they're the opportunities that often close the fastest. Referral channel as an agency should like be an absolute killer, really, if you're doing good work. But you don't want to have that as like your only channel. The other ones that we have in play, we call it inbound, which is just what we called it in HubSpot years ago, and it's too much of a faff to go and change it. But you can think about that as like marketing source revenue. Biz dev, that's what it's called in HubSpot. You can think about that as sales sourced revenue. And then events, which is like us exhibiting at events and getting on stage and talking at them as well, which is something we do occasionally. And yeah, the three channels are very, very different. And you really see that when you start to break down, like, we segment our funnel into discovery calls, ops, and closed won. And if you look at events from a like discovery calls generated perspective, it's like amazing. So far this year, generated like 60 discovery calls with ICP clients from events. But then when you like look at like how many of those actually qualify, 26 led to opportunities and 5 closed. So it whittles down quite quickly. Whereas like with your inbound channel, it's roughly like half the number of discovery calls generated from like marketing sourced revenue, but like more in closed won and like much larger deal size. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting when you look at like the deal size from our marketing sourced revenue, it's like much, much larger than every other channel, which I think testifies to the fact that like people are coming to us because of the brand and because of our personal brands and our expertise, as opposed to at an event, you're just like a guy on a stand. You know what I mean? And like maybe you catch it at the right time, but when people are actually seeking you out because they're like, I trust those guys and I like their ideas, they tend to come to you with a bigger budget in mind.
Yeah, it's that's really interesting, and I want to dig a little bit into. I feel like it shouldn't be black or white, right? Because like I think you sometimes listen to these podcasts and these kind of takeaways, and you think, oh, okay, well, George from Winbox is saying that the majority of his revenue is coming from inbound, so like let's only do that because that's what works. And I know we've spoken offline, which to the point of like it's not either or, right? It's a collection of all of these things and they all feed into one another. Because I'm sure you've got people coming up to you at events who've seen the stuff that you're doing on LinkedIn, right? Like there's that multi-touch kind of attribution. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, from a kind of pipeline reporting standpoint, it's easy to think that like this is an exercise, what are we going to switch on and what are we going to switch off? But I really don't think it's like that. The way I see it is it's a system of multiple parts, and as long as the overall direction of travel is what you want, i.e. like you're hitting whatever your revenue and profit targets are for that financial year, and you're managing to generate like a 3x return on at least on every channel, and ideally higher than that, I think the system's working. And I think where you can start to make really bad decisions is when you're like, this channel's doing X, that channel's doing Y. I'm just going to go off of what's in this spreadsheet and switch that one off, because the story is always really murky. Do you know what I mean? Like I get into, not not arguments, but disagreements with my co-founders about like attributing, like, is that an event opportunity or is that a referral? Great example. We were on stage at a conference doing a talk in December. We were invited there by an old client. So and then we landed a couple of clients off the back of that talk. So in my head, I'm like, that's the referral closed won deal because we got invited there by an ex-client. But understandably, my co-founder's like, you were at an event. So when you like make it really black and white, you lose all that nuance. And I think that's part of the thing that you need to be aware of is it's like, yeah, everything in marketing is multi-channel, but also it's really hard to like tease apart in the reporting, like exactly even what is an event slash referral. So you kind of have to accept that as long as you're happy with like the net ROI and the performance of those channels, I try not to rock the boat too much. I also try not to add too many new channels in, because I think it's easy to think like what we need is just like another thing to pour money into. But I think sometimes it's better to like just completely smash 3 or 4 things than try and do 8 at once.
Going back, if you were starting from ground zero, right, knowing what you know now from your experience building this kind of, marketing machine at Winbox, what does that look like?
Yeah. Oh man, I've thought this many, many times. I would say if there's like an audience of kind of like, yeah, service company owners and marketers here, or people that are just trying to grow service company businesses, I would say the big things I would do differently is I'd invest more aggressively in marketing from earlier, because that was really like an inflection point, is when we said we're going to need to start putting some serious money into this business if we want to change how people see it. There is also this kind of, it's like a curve, like the classic exponential curve. And I think like agencies often spend years and years working with types of companies they don't want to work with until they get the confidence to say, no, like we're not going to work with small fry anymore. We want to be much more ambitious and we want to move up market. And I would say if I was doing this again, I mean, those two things are linked, aren't they? How do you move up market? By investing in marketing. I would say like be more aggressive and more ambitious in terms of the clients you want to win. If I think back to the client budgets we were working with 4 or 5 years ago, it was spending so little money, it was just almost like a waste of time. Whereas now our like ICP is really, we want people that are spending 10 grand a month or more on LinkedIn ads, just media, not even including our fees. And that's like, our ideal kind of ICP qualifying criteria. And we probably should have done that 2 or 3 years ago. But it's just kind of scary. Yeah, they would be the big things.
Is there a difference in terms of your marketing approach or marketing strategy in going after the small fish and going after the big fish, or is it just like we're doing the same kind of things? It's just that we're taking a longer term view horizon on it. Like it's just takes longer to close enterprise accounts, and so we've got to keep our foot on the gas. We've got to keep putting stuff out. This will work. We have faith in the system, or is it you're doing something different?
I think it is fundamentally different. I think one of the big differences when you start to aim for like bigger companies with larger budgets is your market size shrinks. And it shrinks for 2 reasons. Firstly, there's just fewer of those companies, but secondly, more of those companies are trying to do stuff in-house, especially if they've raised funding. You suddenly have like quite a narrow ICP, and when that's the case, you need to shift to more of an account-based approach to marketing, which is what we do now. Like personally, I think most B2B companies should be like thinking with the kind of ABM hat on. That doesn't mean that they should only target like under 50 companies. We have over I think it's like 2,500 companies that we're going after across UK and Europe. But we're only going after them. Like I could not care less about the rest of the companies in Europe. And I don't try and reach them. Like everything that we do is just focused on those people. Even at the tactical level, like when we run ads, and obviously we run a lot of LinkedIn ads, and when we're like boosting our own personal content on LinkedIn, we run it to a defined company list and use LinkedIn's native targeting to filter for the right roles within those companies. And we just don't, as I say, I couldn't care less about anyone outside the list. And I think that is the discipline that you need to have when you want to move up market, is that when you're happy to work with smaller companies, you tend to cast a wider net. Whereas, if you are moving up market, you need to kind of shift to a smaller market. And, the phrase that I'm always using and think about is market saturation. Like we need to reach 50 to 80% of the companies in that at least 4 to 8 times a month, right? That's just on like LinkedIn, how we'd measure, are we saturating this market? It's a penetration of 50 to 80% and a frequency of 4 to 8. And that means that we're hitting those people often enough to influence their decision making should they enter a buying cycle. And were we not doing that, our marketing may as well not exist.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Do you see there being a cyclical kind of nature in the work that you do in regards to what levers you're pulling when throughout the kind of calendar year? So, like, are you pulling, as we've said, like, you shouldn't be turning things off just because a spreadsheet tells you to. But I imagine what you're saying is that, okay, we know that most of our customers are entering into, if they are going to enter into a buying decision kind of cycle, it's going to happen around the financial year end, right? And so we're going to turn certain things up and turn certain things down. What's your thinking around that?
Yeah, I don't know about other agencies. Ours is certainly seasonal. Yeah. It's like you see a peak in interest November, December, and you see another peak in interest around February, March. Over the, next few months, like April, May, June, July, August, it goes kind of quiet, partially because anyone that was going to sign an agency has probably already done it, and now they're onboarding them slash going on holiday over the summer. And then, yeah, I think people do start to lock in agencies around October to March. We operate on a financial year calendar, and we see it every year, and it sucks because over the summer you're like, the market's gone, our messaging's wrong, we're
AI
screwed.
is coming for us.
Yeah, yeah, AI,
Yeah,
man. And then what you realize is that everyone's just in the south of France,
yeah, yeah.
and like it's
They
totally
still
right.
like us. They're just doing something else. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And so, I think every year we have that panic, and what we've tried to tell ourselves, it's easy to say this stuff in theory, but what we want to do this year is make peace with that over the summer months and think less about, acquisition really, and more about brand. It's like, how can we build that mental availability over these next few months so that when people are looking for a new agency later in the year, they come to us, so just kind of shift our approach.
Absolutely. Um, I've really loved how kind of like holistic we've taken this conversation in terms of how you and Winbox look at marketing kind of as a whole. As we look at rounding out the kind of the episode here, and as I kind of mentioned right at the top of this episode, one of the things that kind of struck me in our conversation last week is the time that you're spending on building out your kind of organic social and your personal brands on LinkedIn. And I think it was you that I was speaking to last week where you told me, look, the kind of the Winbox brand account is like one thing, but like where we put a lot of our time and our attention is our personal brand accounts. And I want you to tell me a little bit around your thinking on your personal brand and why it's important and the kind of results you're seeing off the back of it. And then maybe we can finish up with just a couple of 2 or 3 tactical tips of things that you've learned that's taken you from just kind of posting to posting with impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the personal brand side of things, ultimately people work with agencies because of the people. That's what they're really buying. There isn't much else to an agency other than the people within it and maybe some IP. So it makes sense from a business model perspective. Just in terms of LinkedIn as a channel, like it's just all about personal accounts. It kind of always has been. I just feel like everyone's just waking up to that now. And the reason for that is just, I don't know, human nature, how people use social media. Nobody goes on LinkedIn to hang out with brands. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone's there to hang out with people. People are like endlessly fascinating and interesting, and most brands, especially B2B brands, are really boring. That's how I think about it. And this is what I'm saying to my clients like all the time. You need to like not default to the brand channel. LinkedIn is about personal profiles right now, and it's going to stay that way. So like the best distribution channel on LinkedIn is your people. And the challenge is like finding people who are happy to get out there and bat for your company. In terms of how we've gone about doing that, I used to post on LinkedIn like way back in the day, when I was kind of more of a copywriter than I guess like an entrepreneur, a business owner, and built up a bit of an audience around copywriting, but it was just like me having fun and bants. And then when we started to get more serious about like investing in our marketing, realized I need to start actually talking about what we do. So yeah, it's as simple as we post every day. We have a podcast, a video podcast, and every week we share clips from that. I try and share the best of what I know and what I'm doing. And also, really importantly, just try to be a member of a community, right? There's an ongoing conversation around LinkedIn ads, and that conversation is not about me or Winbox. It's about like people trying to solve problems. And I just try and hang out and be as friendly and helpful as I can. That sounds so corny, but it's always served me well. Like I always think that on social media, like before you can sell into a community, you need to join that community. Do you know what I mean? And the way you do that is by contributing to it and giving away like what you know. And ideally like coming up with stuff that's genuinely useful. And I like to think we do that. Mark, my co-founder, is also like 5 days a week. We do the podcast together. Maybe the fact that there's 2 of us helps. A range of formats: text, image, carousel, video. I think a mix is important. I don't think any one format is the key because LinkedIn's always changing its mind about what it wants to push hardest. So just keep switching it up. And yeah, it's been transformational for our business. Like LinkedIn and especially our personal accounts are like the driving force of our growth right now. And I think it's stay that way. And it sounds superficial, but that is literally just from committing to posting 5 days a week and spending time out there trying to add value to people who are learning about LinkedIn ads.
And in terms of, because you're talking, about publishing stuff yourself and being helpful and sharing content, you're also talking about, like engaging with the community. And so like as a ratio of your time spent on LinkedIn, what is the split between posting and like commenting and responding and engaging with other content that other people are creating?
I probably only do like 15 to 20 minutes of commenting a day, and I do it kind of in between work. When I'm flagging a bit, I'll like, eat a piece of fruit and switch on to commenting for a bit just to get my energy levels back up before I jump back into client work. In terms of like content creation, I mean, it's probably worth saying as well, because I probably haven't gone into enough detail. We're a bit of like a content powerhouse. Our background is content marketing, and I run our creative studio. An unfair advantage we have is that like we can knock out a ton of content every month basically for free. So every month we publish like half hour to an hour long podcast. That's a video podcast, 40 LinkedIn posts, 8 video shorts, 4 newsletters, a webinar, and a quarterly event. So there's lots for us to talk about. And that's kind of how I see like all of that content has its value, and it all like helps the pipeline kind of grow and move. But also it gives us tons to talk about on LinkedIn because there's always stuff launching, always stuff happening, which I think is good. But yeah, I mean, I just do 2 hours a week in terms of like new content creation. And I do the classic thing of every time I have an idea, I just record a voice note on my phone and, capture it in that moment and then polish them up on Monday morning. So it's pretty straightforward from a kind of, it's not like I'm sat there like 4 hours a day. It's kind of a 2 hour window once a week, 20 minutes a day. But I think the thing that makes it work is like the content machine that sits behind that, which is like video editors, a recording studio. We've got a team of 3 designers. We've got a motion graphics guy. So all of that is like feeding stuff to me and Mark to post.
And, I'm sure the people listening to this podcast, to a greater or lesser extent, can think about building their own machine. I mean, not everyone's going to have like designers and, motion graphic artists and whatever behind them to kind of give them stuff. But like even just Claude, for example, this week I've been pumping out posts where, like you say, I've been voice noting into Claude. Okay, I want to do a post about, what do people get wrong about podcast measurement? And like, here's a bunch of what I think about that. And then it takes me 5 minutes while I'm walking the dog. It's a word vomit, brain dump, like it's not clean. But then using that tool to just like, okay, synthesize these thoughts into something that has like a coherent narrative. It's all still my work, right? It's my ideas, it's my thinking, but it means that instead of spending an hour at my desk trying to type it out perfectly, I've spent 5 minutes talking about it and I've got something out there. Which reminds me of something you said to me last week, actually, which really has stuck with me. And I've said a couple of times to my colleagues this week. I think you said something along the lines of, I would rather have something go out every day and like not be perfect than to sit on it for weeks and no one's seeing me. Like I've butchered the delivery of that. But yeah, that really stuck with me because it's true, like good is better than perfect. Like done is better than perfect, more importantly.
And that's true of like marketing in general. Like there's a thing in copywriting. It's like you can't control the quality, you can always control the quantity. So like when you're writing a headline, my background's copywriting. So like all of this is coming from a place of copywriting. When you're trying to write like an amazing headline, rule 1 is write 50 bad ones and you will get there. Do you know what I mean? Whereas like, and marketing is like that. If you want to get really good at webinars, don't spend like months and months and months preparing it. Just start doing them like 2 weeks from now and you will just get better over time. And the time that you spend learning how to not suck at it, you're building an audience. Do you know what I mean? You're like putting in the reps, but also people are paying attention to you. Yeah, and I think the thing that you said about Claude there is so true. I walk to and from work, and so many of my ideas happen like when I'm walking, and it's like a way better way to think through stuff than sitting at a keyboard. Do you know what I mean? Like you're outside in the fresh air, like you've got your phone in your hand, you just record a quick note. That's a way better way to create content, I think.
Absolutely. George, I love how we've kind of started kind of really high level strategic marketing and then kind of like really gotten drilled down into kind of like tactical how here's how you can create content at
Yeah,
scale,
here's how to
even with
post.
he's out of post. Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes as marketers, you kind of feel like, oh, you don't really want to teach people to suck eggs, but like, through working with your clients, and I know through working with my clients, a lot of people just like aren't aware of this stuff, like, or feel like it's okay to do things in this way. And hopefully someone listening to this can walk away and be like, actually, you know what? I feel motivated enough and I have, the tools available to me that I can like start posting with frequency and see that transform my business like it's done for Winbox.
Yeah, and I will say that, like, yeah, it can. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're an agency or a service company, and like ultimately the company exists to like share your expertise and knowledge, then sharing that expertise and knowledge is like step one to growing that company, and it does literally just start by like posting. It's
Yeah,
that simple.
exactly.
And,
It's
like,
simple as that.
I've made it sound like there's all, you need to do all this other stuff, but that's like where we are in a 5-year journey to get here. But that 5-year journey started with like posting rubbish and getting like 2 likes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I, I say to our clients, when we're doing the podcast for them, it doesn't matter how much work and time we put into the first 10 episodes. By the time we get to episode 100, you'll look back and you'll think they suck. Like that's just the way it is, because it's better for us to get 100 reps in. Like we'll learn so much through that process that, that's the only way to learn. It's just by doing. So start now, right?
The only caveat I'd throw in there, I suppose, is like the only bit that you do need to get right from day one, I mean, you can adjust, is like ICP, audience. Yeah, those like fundamentals of like who are we trying to sell to? Because I think that is often, as I said, at the start of like with service companies, why they stay small for longer than they want to is because they're trying to sell to like the wrong group of people. And there's probably people out there that will pay them a lot more money and probably be better clients than they realize if they just shifted their focus slightly. But yeah, no, you're right.
George, this has been a fantastic conversation. We said we were going to go 20 minutes. We've gone almost 30, which is usually a good sign. Where can people learn more about you and more about Winbox?
Yeah, it goes without saying. Obviously, LinkedIn is where I share
Really?
most.
What a what a surprise!
Never heard of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so follow on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Ads Insider podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Website is winbox.co. And yeah, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, from growing agencies and service companies through to like LinkedIn marketing, LinkedIn ads, building personal brands, I love talking about this stuff. I'm always happy to help. Like my DMs are always filling up with people asking questions, and that's great. So yeah, get in touch anytime. Happy to help.
awesome. Well, we'll drop the link to your profile in the show notes of this episode. We'll also drop Winbox's website. But George, thank you so much for coming on the Pipe Dream today, and we'll catch you down the line.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been great.